This is The Camp with Zach Heilprin and the Athletics' Jesse Temple.
Yes, welcome into The Camp. I'm Zach Heilprin. That's the Athletics' Jesse Temple. We are back from Pullman, Washington. It was quite the trip. Not so great for the Badgers. Was okay for Jesse Temple. Was okay for Jesse Temple. He did a great job writing about the loss Wisconsin took. Also got pulled over on the way home, but didn't get a ticket. How big of a win was that, Jesse?
Life is about small victories, and I think that was one for me. It was going to be terrible.
It was
a rough night.
It was going to be tough. It was, but that was a night. The cop was nice enough to let you off. So, we were only delayed by about 15 minutes trying to get back to Spokane late at night. But thank you to the police officer Pullman that's letting people off for going 15 over in downtown Pullman, Washington, just speeding around corners. And
all right, take it easy. But Zach and I were like, 0.3 of a mile outside of the stadium. Obviously, I have no idea where I am or what I'm doing. And all of a sudden, the cop lights shine behind me, and he comes over. And I said, "How bad was it?" And he was like, he started off kind of like a bit of a hard ass,
a little hard.
Who knows what he could have been thinking? Maybe the party was raging a little too long is what he thought. I'm not sure. But he said, well, you were going 40 and a 25, so it's pretty bad. And he said, this is going to be about a $250 ticket. And if you don't know the speed limit, he said something that made no sense to me in retrospect. It was like, the signs say if you don't know the speed limit, you should go 25. It's like, well, if I knew there was a sign, then I would have seen the speed limit and gone that speed limit. But he was gone for like 10 minutes, came back, and he said, I don't know what he said. He said, I'll let you off with was it even a warning? I guess it was a warning. There was no citation.
Right.
So shout out to him. And he said, but what did he say? Like, if anybody else gets stopped again, they won't be so nice. I was like, well, I'm out of here at 7 a.m. So we'll have 6 hours left in Washington.
He's like, all right, take it slow to the airport or wherever you're going then.
Yeah.
It was it could have been a lot worse. I mean, we were thinking about all the things that you could have done with $250, but like the $250, you went to a game, you covered it, and you still lost $250 without betting on it. So that would have been
brutal.
That would have been impressive.
Happened to me once before though. 2014 against Northwestern, got a ticket on the way back, lost money that day.
For as much as I've driven, we talked about it the other night, I have not gotten a ticket in like 10 years, and that's me knocking on wood. But we drive so much in this job, it's bound to happen. So. Just the fact that it happened so close to the stadium where like you had barely even stepped on the gas. That was impressive. All right. Wisconsin also played on Saturday night. They lost 31-22 to Washington State. There were some impressive things. I don't want to just focus on the negative things that happened in that game. There obviously were plenty. Do we want to start with the positive? Do we want to start with the negative? It's up to you.
We should start with the negative. What are fans talking about in the comments section? It's not, wow, Tanner Mordecai's touchdown pass really showed how nimble he was. It's not
about Nathaniel Vakos going. It's not about Nathaniel Vakos going 3 for 3 and hitting all his extra points.
I don't think anybody was too jazzed about the kicker being the first half MVP, other than perhaps Hunter Wohler. Hey, Vakos is exactly who they wanted him to be, but you don't want to trade touchdowns for field goals.
Yeah, the Nathaniel Vakos for Heisman campaign has started. I got, I believe there's a Twitter account and an Instagram account already, so got that going. All right, negative stuff. We'll start with the first half, and I guess we'll go defense first, because I think they were able to find some answers later on, but they get off the field after on the first drive, but then touchdown, field goal, and the 2 touchdown drives, they put up very little resistance. I thought at times those 2 drives kind of looked like Ohio State, and I know they didn't have Ohio State talent, but the Ohio State game in 2022 was a lot of talent, but it was also just an absolute coaching class of Ryan Day and company out coaching Jim Leonard and scheming guys open, and guys were running open all over the place. And it felt similar to that on those 2 drives and a little bit on the field goal drive before they stiffened, but it's a slow start, and that's slow start in back-to-back games, especially offensively, but defensively as well.
From a defensive standpoint, I have to say I was a bit surprised by the way the Badgers came out, because first of all, they played last year and the defense did a reasonably good job, but they had an understanding of what to expect, at least the guys who were here last season, because they just played them. And secondarily, they knew that the pace of play was going to be even faster than what they saw from Wisconsin's offense. It's something that Luke Fickell talked about last Monday. So it surprised me that they just were on their heels consistently. And we saw what happened. And I think the other thing is, and to me, this really highlighted maybe how out of sorts the defense was. But there were two plays where they had 12 guys on the field and 13 guys on the field. And I know that the substitutions can be challenging, but that's why the rules are in place, where you've got an official standing over the ball, going like this, telling the quarterback that they can't snap the ball, the quarterback in the center. But there was a sequence where, I believe it was Jason Matry and Travion Blaylock ran onto the field, and I think one of them was supposed to replace James Thompson Jr. so they could change packages, but it ended up being a free play that went for a 17-yard completion. And then after that trick pass play that was a 39-yarder down to the one, Jake Chaney said their coach admitted afterward he thought that it was a touchdown, and they were sending out the field goal, like the base field goal team. They had 13 guys on the field, and they just threw a little short 1-yard touchdown pass into I mean, Washington State was probably going to score anyway, but the point is, to me, it highlighted how out of sorts everybody was defensively, and it surprised me.
It was surprising, and yet kind of saw shades of it big play wise against Buffalo, right? And Cam Ward was fantastic, and he was statistically wasn't that much better than he was last year against Wisconsin. I think he threw for 12 more yards this year. He obviously did not turn the ball over, which he did do last year, but his feet made some plays. And I know it was certainly later in the game where that came, and when they were trying to get off the field in the fourth quarter after the fumble by Ches Malusi. But he just looks so much more confident and was willing to throw and let his guys make some plays. And they did in the first quarter and a half. And then things kind of switched for Wisconsin. And I've seen a lot of people ask, like, what changed for Wisconsin? And I don't necessarily, and I know Louis Riddick really, really harped on trying to show Cam Ward different things, not bringing just 3 guys, not bringing just 4 guys, bringing guys from different places, fake blitzing, like just trying to get his eyes in different places. I think that was part of it, but I think guys also just started winning their matchups as well and started, getting some pressure on them, started having some success in that respect, as opposed to just changing things completely.
Ward had the first half was something like 180 yards passing, a couple touchdowns. And so statistically in the second half, they really did a good job of holding him in check until later when he was able to get free. But that's what a dynamic quarterback can do. We've seen this before, that they can present problems for Wisconsin and a bunch of other defenses throughout college football. When you're multidimensional, it makes it challenging because if something breaks down, he can get out of the pocket. It's hard because everyone was responsible for this loss. The defense put Wisconsin in a bad position early, but the offense it wasn't good enough for way too long. So the blame goes everywhere, but they obviously have a ton that they need to clean up. And one thing that I think is interesting here is, since we're talking about the defense, but it goes to the offense too. It's something I asked Luke after the game. Does he have any thoughts about the fact you've got a totally new coaching staff, you're implementing a new defensive system, and while it may not be as drastic as offense, there's still newness. And obviously we know about the offensive changes, and he was not willing to make excuses. And he said, we have the talent to win now. It's the little details that it comes down to. But I mean, watching that game, it made me think, maybe this overhaul is going to take a little longer than a lot of people had hoped. And I don't even know if that's excuse making. It's just, it is what it is. I don't know. Was it realistic to believe they'd roll in here right away and everything would be perfect? No.
Correct. I think it's also worth noting one other defensive change that they made in personnel wise, and that was Kamoi Latu being taken out and Preston Zachman being inserted. It happened after one big play, I believe, on the second drive, and then it happened again, I believe, for the rest of the game later in the second quarter. And so after they go touchdown, field goal on 3 of their first 4 drives, the rest of their drives, minus 11. I'm going to take the end of the half out of it because they just kneeled it, but a minus 11, 6 yards, 27 yards, minus 1, minus 8. They went punt, end of half, punt, punt, punt. it was as dominant of a defense performance as you could ask for in that time. And they did exactly what you were kind of not expecting all the time, because you're not expecting a dominant defense with a new staff and everything, and so many losing Nick Herbig, losing Keanu Benton, and losing John Torchio. But that was dominant.
The next step for the defense is the takeaways. And that's always a weird topic, because you hear people say, oh, it's contagious, and once one happens, like, I don't know if I believe that. And I also don't know, no matter how much you coach it, you have to be in the right position. So yes, they had a really good stretch. I think that's an encouraging sign. I don't know exactly what to expect moving forward from the group. I do think they'll continue to be better, but there's a lot to harp on both sides.
So you talk about the turnovers, and that is a big part. They've turned it over, 5 times in the first 2 games and gotten 0 turnovers. That's back-to-back games without turnovers. It's just the second time since 2016 that they've gone back-to-back games without turnovers. Someone asked in the Twitter questions, and I didn't have a chance, despite sitting around an airport yesterday, to go back and look exactly the last time they didn't have, turnovers in the first 2 games of the season. I guarantee it's been a while. Mm-hmm. But the fact that they had gone so long, I mean, they did it at the end of last year too. They didn't have turnovers against Minnesota, or who was the game before Minnesota last year? Nebraska. They didn't turn the ball over. They didn't force turnovers in either of those 2 games. They did against Oklahoma State in the finale, or in the bowl game, and then haven't had any these last 2 games. So for the last 5 games, they have not been able to force a turnover. And while yes, you to an extent have to, they come at times. They come in bunches at times. If you're not turning the ball over, you're making things extremely, extremely difficult for your defense. And they're in that right now.
Pickle talked about that too after the game. It's those little details, but one of the first things he addressed was you lose the turnover battle 3-0 on the road. You're not giving yourself much of an opportunity. So I don't know what the defense needs to do. And it's interesting because it's a half a step, right? Muma Jongmeta talked about it after the game. There was a play late where I don't fault Muma. It's just the ball went right by him. He said, I was half a step slow. And if you're in a little bit different position, maybe you can change the complexion of the game. And that's what it's going to take. But the other thing is, good teams find ways. And that's what Wisconsin is going to have to do moving forward.
Yeah. So just in very fast trying to research here, it hasn't happened since 2007, going back-to-back games without creating a turnover in the first 2 games of the season. So they're in historical terms right now. And that's as far back as I got right now. I'll look at it maybe later and update this, but it's been a while since it's happened, and that just makes things extremely difficult, because your offense is turning the ball over. They turned it over 3 times. They had 2 fumbles from quarterback Tanner Mordecai, who I'm not necessarily going to blame for those. Some people will say pocket presence. And then they had the obviously questionable, but it was called a fumble, so it is a fumble. Ches Malusi on a drive where they had a chance to take the lead. So, but let's start in the first half with the Wisconsin offense. Another slow start. They had 14 points to start last week. They had obviously 9 points in the first half this week. They were able to move the ball to an extent, but got down into Washington State territory and could not finish.
They had 2 red zone trips that ended in field goals, and the other one, I believe, they got down to the 25. I know there was a lot of talk coming into this season about what does Phil Longo's offense look like when you get into the red zone. You have much less room to operate. I'm willing to withhold some judgment here. We're 2 games into the season. They did score a red zone touchdown later at a couple nice scoring drives, but obviously you can't trade field goals for touchdowns, especially against an up-tempo offense like Washington State. It's interesting because I think Tanner played a really solid game, and yet there's the 2 turnovers. But I let's just get to it right now. Jack Nelson got beaten around by Ron Stone Jr., the edge rusher. 2 exact same types of situations where he got him off the edge and he sacked Mordecai. That's obviously Mordecai's blind side, forced the fumble. The first time Wisconsin was able defensively to escape that one. I think that was the one where Jake Chaney got a massive sack, like 13-yard loss, and knocked him out of field goal range and they had to punt. But obviously the second one, that is absolutely backbreaking. People are going to make mistakes, but you can't have that kind of a mistake in that situation because Mordecai lost the ball. They pounced on it in the end zone, and it's 24-6. 24-6 on the road. I think Wisconsin played very admirably from that point forward, but you're not giving yourself much of a chance when you're down 24-6 on the road.
You're not. And, Jack Nelson, a lot has been said about him as a potential draft pick, and he did not look the part of it in the first half. Now, again, the offensive line itself bounced back, I thought, especially in the second half, but you can't have those type of plays on the road in that environment, which was pretty hostile to start. Fans kind of, when they went up 24-6, kind of lost it and a lot left. I mean, the stadium was full at the beginning. It was not full at the when Wisconsin was making its comeback, but those are plays you just can't have. You can't have them if you're going to win on the road against a team that, while some people are going to say, oh, Washington State's not even going to make a bowl game, they're not very good. I think that offense is going to put up a lot of points this year, and that defense with some of the pass rushers that they have are going to make life difficult. Are they going to beat USC? Probably not. Are they going to beat Oregon? Probably not. But they have, if they play them. I don't even know if they play them. But are they at that level of a Pac-12 team? Probably not. But they have some individual talent that is going to make life difficult for guys, and they made life difficult for Wisconsin's offensive line in there in the first half. So, and yet there were moments of brilliance, I think, for the Wisconsin offense, especially when targeting Bryson Green. You had obviously a couple big shots to Chimere Dike. There were signs of progress, signs of life from the downfield passing game for Wisconsin.
Right. One more thing on Jack, too. I think, I'm not willing to say just because he had a poor performance, that's who he is, because coming in, what's interesting is last year he had the highest pass blocking grade, at least according to Pro Football Focus, by any Wisconsin offensive lineman since Tyler Biadasz in 2019. So he had a bad day. He got beaten by a guy who certainly looked like an NFL player to me, but you've got to be able to clean that up. And like you said, they did do a better job at protecting Mordecai later in the game. And when he's got time, you see what he can do. He was really dealing. And I think that's what's so different about this team. The last 3 years, if Wisconsin gets down 24-6, that final score might be 42-13 or something like that. How many games did we see like that? So because you've got a passing attack like this, you can change the complexion of the game. Now, it's unfortunate for Wisconsin that when they got within two, the 2-point conversion failed, and that was it. They fizzled out. But I think it did show something about what's possible for this offense. And even more intriguing was the fact their running game for most of the game was virtually non-existent. And so that makes it more challenging too. But I think Mordecai played very well. And the best play of the game was the touchdown pass to Skylar Bell, because Stone beat Nelson again, looked like he was going to get his third sack. The way Mordecai was able to escape that pressure, keep the play going, and find Skylar in the left corner of that end zone for the touchdown. I don't know how many quarterbacks Wisconsin's had recently that can do that.
Recently, I don't think there's any. I mean, because you have to have the mobility to get outside and make that play. I guess maybe Jack Cohn could have done it, but rolling to his left and throwing back across his body like that, or having to toward his body in the direction it was with Ron Stone being right there, I thought it was a sack. I thought it was a sack where he's throwing the ball away, and yet he made just a remarkable throw, and it was a great catch too, and it was an NFL catch because he got both feet in. Did Skylar Bell. It was the passing game showed kind of some of what we saw, I think, in spring ball and in fall camp that we hadn't necessarily seen from Tanner Mordecai, or Wisconsin fans hadn't seen from Tanner Mordecai at points. And to me, that is extremely intriguing. And you go back and you wonder, all right, did Washington State say, all right, we saw Buffalo say, all right, you're going to beat us with the run game, and they did. We're going to make them beat us with their arm. But I just thought the speed for Washington State's defense certainly affected some of what Wisconsin wanted to do in the run game, and they were tough to block at times. Ches Malusi got 12 carries. Braylon Allen just 7 carries. Now, he did get 6 catches, and I know we joked last week about him being on pace for 91 catches, and he probably is, but I'm wondering if those 91 – I mean, it's a little bit less than 91 because he had 7 catches week 1, 6 catches week 2. But would those catches result in being over 100 yards on the year?
Right. That's what that's what I was joking about in the press box too. Let's say he gets 100 catches, it'll be for 200 yards. Would you trade that for some of those rushing opportunities? They're still trying to figure out a way to obviously move the ball and get him involved in a variety of ways. That was not his best performance, and it's interesting to go from Wisconsin had 312 yards rushing, I think it was in the opener, which is the most the Badgers have had in 2 years. You see that, you put that on film, and you think we got to stop that. But we know the running game needs to be markedly better.
Yeah, they had 90 yards rushing, and Tanner Mordecai accounted for 21 of that. If you take away the sacks, he had 43 yards rushing, and they were. I thought we saw his athleticism and his mobility extensively on Saturday night. And I think that makes him unique and dynamic for a Wisconsin quarterback because it just hasn't been that. There was a stretch there where he completed 10 straight of his passes. He was 22 for 31 at, I think it was 23 for 31 at one point. And they were chugging along. They were chugging along, and it felt like it was just a matter of time before they took the lead, right? It was 24-22. The defense, almost has the safety. Was this, in your personal opinion, Jesse, was that a safety?
Badgers fans are probably going to get after me because I think everyone and their mom was saying it was a safety. I don't know that I had the best angle. I think it's hard because you see him going backward in the end zone, but where the ball was, I think it was in front of the line. So I don't know. I know people want to blame the refs and all that, but I don't think it was a safety.
What's funny about that is you'd say you didn't have the best view. The guy who's marking it is the umpire who is standing 5 yards behind the play. I don't know how where exactly his view is in terms of where Cam Ward was when forward progress was stopped. Me personally, and again, whether it's a rule or otherwise, when the quarterback takes a step back on his own, intentionally moves back towards the end zone, I think his momentum is going back into the end zone, and it isn't stopped until he goes down. And so, I know rule wise that doesn't necessarily fly, but in my personal opinion, we talk about forward progress. If he's going to go back on his own, if he's running back, like for a first down, if a wide receiver has a first down and then runs back behind the first down, trying to get away from somebody, they mark him back. So personally, if the rules are the way that in my mind that they should be, it's a safety, but it wasn't. But it didn't matter. Wisconsin got the ball back, and Chimere Dike gets about a 10-yard turn, sets him up at the 34-yard line. They're at Washington State's 34-yard line. It feels like they have all the momentum. It feels like they're just moments away from scoring to take the lead, and Caden Johnson gets the 15-yard penalty after the play. And penalties were a huge part of the loss against Washington State the previous year, and they played a role on Saturday night, not as big a role, but that one was huge because 2 plays later, Ches fumbles. Again, you have to call it a fumble because it was called a fumble on the field, even though, video evidence wise, I think if it's not called anything on the field, it's Wisconsin's ball, but it wasn't. And it was called a fumble, even though there was no beanbag thrown. There was no there was no immediate signals until Washington State came away with the ball. But the fact that there was no angle on the play, either like a really, really good angle to show whether there was a fumble there or not, disappointing on the part of ABC. But either way, Wisconsin had an opportunity there to go and take the lead, and I thought they were going to, and the fumble, and then they just could never get that momentum back.
Least enthusiastic call by an official, maybe, since the Packers Seahawks game?
Yeah. Incomplete.
Sorry to bring up hard feelings.
Touchback.
But it's tough because it's exactly like you're saying, whatever the call is on the field is what it's going to be, simply because you didn't have a good angle. I have no idea. It didn't look to me like a fumble, even on the replays, but you couldn't tell because, was his left arm down? Was the ball coming out? No idea. Obviously, that one was crushing, but they still had a couple other drives and couldn't get in. And obviously, Luke was asked about this too. I don't really have an issue with this where they went for 2. They're down by 2 points. It was like 25 seconds left in the third quarter. By not getting it, you put yourself in a position where if you give up a touchdown, you're down 9, but don't give up the touchdown. Score some other points. I thought it was a fine decision to go for 2 at the end of the third quarter.
I didn't have a huge problem with it. I feel like doing it that early is kind of chasing it, but he also thought that he didn't think it was that big of deal that they didn't get it momentum wise, like energy wise. Like it wasn't, he thinks 24-24 is a much different game energy wise than 24-22, but he also didn't think like Washington State's all of a sudden got this big jump, and they didn't. I mean, Wisconsin defense continued to slow them down even after that play. So one other play stood out for me, and in the moment, it felt like, Bryson Green probably should have caught the ball, but that post route that he ran, that he was, he was streaking wide open. And I feel like if you're just Tanner Mordecai, that's the one throw you're probably holding on to and being like, if I make that throw, we win this game, because he was streaking open. If he puts it on him instead of maybe he put a little bit too much underneath it. Maybe if it's just a dart, it's a touchdown. That one to me is going to stick out as, the offense was pretty good in the third quarter, and shades of the fourth, but that play right there is probably one that sticks out to me. Is there anyone for you?
Well, I feel like there's a lot, but that's a pretty good one, because Bryson, I think he showed some really good flashes in that game. The kind of the stuff we've been talking about throughout preseason practices. Even with the throw, I thought he was going to get it. He's one of those guys, and you talk about this with basketball players, with the 3-point shooters, the way you can see guys on the bench just raise their arms like you think every shot's going in. I feel like from watching Bryson, you just put the ball in the area and he's going to come down with it, but just a little off target, and that can be the difference between winning and losing.
It can be. He had another, and I think Louis Riddick called it an NFL type throw. I think it's an NFL type play just because we see it a ton in the NFL, is that little back shoulder. It's one-on-one back shoulder, and the cornerback's back is the quarterback, and he has no idea that the ball is coming his way, and you just a little stop and it's right there. And it was a really, really nice throw. I feel like those are throws that you could certainly do when you're going to play the way that Washington State played, the press man on the outside, and not a ton of safety help. Those, the throws down the field are things that are going to be open, and you have to hit on them. In Wisconsin, it felt like they hit on it a couple times, right? They got the one to Chim down the side. They got the one down to obviously Bryson for, I think was it 54. It was a big gain. Those are the type of throws that are going to be available, and I think they have the wide receivers and the quarterback to hit on them on a regular basis. They didn't hit them enough against Washington State, but they were there. They were there to be hit, and they just like a second off, or a yard off, or 2 yards off of making Washington State pay for the type of offense or the type of defense that they were trying to play against Wisconsin on the outside and for large stretches of that game.
I think right now it's hard not to think this is going to be a process, but I also, we could get into a situation where it's game 8 or game 10. And if you're still saying the same thing, you're in big trouble. I'm certainly waiting to see, can this group put it together for a full game or close to a full game and show, okay, this is what Wisconsin football is this season? Because right now, this is what Wisconsin football is, that a little bit of inconsistency, and I don't know how long it's going to take. The flashes are certainly intriguing and eye-opening, but you've got to be able to do it much longer to win some of these other games. Yeah, you would expect them to handle Georgia Southern fairly easily. The Purdue game in 2 weeks is going to be interesting, even though they've haven't lost to Purdue for 20 years, but there's some tough matchups coming up against really good defenses that are going to make it difficult. And in those games, can you show that you can be the offense that everybody hoped you could be?
Yeah. Was there anything else that you want to hit on in the game before we get to the folks' Twitter questions?
I think we covered it. We've relived as much of that game as Badgers fans are probably interested in reliving.
And yet we're going to do a little bit more of it here with some of the folks' Twitter questions. All right, we'll start with AJ. He says, here's one. Why, despite all the fever pitch hype from the staff and the AD, does the team look worse than last year?
Is it worse than last year? They did lose 6 regular season games. I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that.
I think the offense certainly looks better than it did against Washington State last year. Now, how many more points did they score? Obviously, it's not a ton more, but 8 more. The passing game looked better. Got to be better and protected the quarterback early. We haven't hit on this yet, but it was obviously a story after the game because it was a story leading into the game. The inability to finish in the fourth quarter, that was certainly something that was talked about going in. But I thought Luke Fickell hit on it. Yeah, we didn't finish the way we wanted to, and we had an opportunity to do that. We put ourselves in position to do that, but we also put ourselves in a very, very tough position to be down 24-6 and to start the game the way that they have. The team in the third quarter that we saw, and I think we were kind of talking about this on the way back to the car with the the group of us, is what we saw in the third quarter is kind of who Wisconsin can be. Both the third quarter against Buffalo, the third quarter against Washington State, and can you consistently be that for 40 minutes? For the full 60 minutes. I don't know if that's something that Wisconsin can do, but we know they have it in them.
It was encouraging, but it gets lost when you don't win the game. So
of course it does. Of course it does. But that's what I'm saying. Like, if you can get off to a better start, if you can put yourselves in better position, you're not down 24-6. It shouldn't take you 20 minutes to hit the ground running if you're on, either side of the ball. And it kind of did, especially for the defense. It kind of did. In the offense, certainly the inability to finish drives in the first half is what cost them the game. I mean, if you look back at it, the inability to finish drives, the inability to protect the quarterback and protect the ball cost you the game there in the first half. Put yourselves in better position, you'd be okay. I don't know if the team looks worse than it did last year, though.
No, I'm not willing to go that far. You'd be in dire straits, and it's still early.
People are really diving off the deep end here. And Keith says he's 30% joking on this one, but now that the season is over and the honeymoon is over, should we see how Locke looks?
Oh, now that the season is over.
Yeah.
Wow. Didn't know they were canceling the next 10 regular season games.
33% joking.
No.
Okay.
We've already said it. You can't blame that on Tanner. Yeah, he had the 2 fumbles. His left tackle got blown up, and I think he's been very good other than those 2 picks in week 1.
Yeah. CT Badger says, and he asked this question a couple of weeks ago about going 2-2 to start the season. He says, reframing a previous question, after Wisconsin starts 2-2, do you still feel they can win the West?
Well, if they're 2-2, I assume you mean they lose to Purdue and not Georgia Southern. No, I don't. Like, I would say yes, because the West is like it is in most years, where I don't think anybody is the cream of the crop. But if you lose your opener to a Purdue team you haven't lost to in 20 years, then what confidence would I have that you can win some of these other games when Ohio State's coming to play in Camp Randall? You got to play at Minnesota, obviously, Iowa, the Illinois game, although Illinois, woof, not looking so good for the fighting Brett Bielema's after that loss to Kansas. But no, I don't feel very good about their chance. You got to win games like that.
The plant of Jim Leonard in Illinois is working very, very well. Paying him $1 million to go down there and sabotage their defense. It's looking pretty good. Looking pretty good right now.
Conspiracy theory.
Yeah. Kyle says, I'd love to hear why their best player only had 7 carries and why they seem to think he's best used as an extra blocker on passing downs.
His best play was when he was a fullback on the pitch play that went for a touchdown to Chez Malusi. Well, what does that say when his best play was him not getting the ball? I don't know. I imagine that's got to be something they're going to look at. Now, when he did get it, they were obviously swarming. It wasn't like he had 7 carries and 50 yards rushing, but he's a preseason second team All-American. Like, he's supposed to be one of the best players in the country. You've got to figure out ways to get him the ball in successful situations. And I know they would say figuring out ways is getting the ball to him in space on some of those pass plays, but none of those pass plays really had, none of them went for big gains. He had 6 catches for 12 yards.
Yeah. The little screen that he had that seemed to be set wide open, and the guy, give credit to the linebacker for making a little play on the little pitch to him from Mordecai, where it was kind of like a fake to the outside, and then it was all wide open in the middle. Guy made a great play. If he doesn't make that play, Braylon's taken off, and it's a big game. The guy made a great play. And so they need to figure out ways. I'm interested to hear from Braylon. We did not get to hear from him after the game, kind of where his mind's at after getting 7 carries, which is the fewest in a game that he started. And the 20 yards that he had is the second fewest he's had in a game that he started. The other one was the Illinois game when he had 8 carries for 2 yards. So he was involved. He got 13 touches, but probably not involved the way that he definitely wanted to be. Whiskey Lover says, is offensive line play holding the team back? He says, great wideouts, running backs, and finally a gamer at quarterback. Blocking sucks, and not just Jack Nelson.
I don't know. I don't think so. I feel like it's real easy to make kind of rash judgments right now, because I think they did a pretty damn good job of blocking in week 1. Obviously, the competition got better in week 2, but I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think it's just a terrible situation where Mordecai is consistently under pressure. I know they didn't run the ball very well in week 2, but no.
Okay. Saul says, second straight game, didn't see much rotation in the offensive line group, as they mentioned they would have. How many played, and thought they would have switched after the first half struggles? When we did see some movement. Obviously, Trey Wettig working at guard for Joe Huber, and we saw that in the first game too, a little bit at right guard with Michael Furtney. So it feels like they have a little bit of a rotation there, but outside of that, there hasn't been.
I don't think we expected there to be more than that.
Jake
Renfro's
did talk about
not
in the spring
playing,
wanted to play 7 guys, right?
Well, right, but Jake Renfro not being available changes the math on that, and I know that Jack McNell Jr. said during the preseason that he liked everyone in his 2 deep, but there's obviously a drop off, and if there weren't, you'd see Nolan Rucci come into the game after Jack Nelson struggles. But there's a reason why Nelson continues to play, so this is who we're going to see, and I imagine it's going to be this way until Renfro is healthy, and maybe they can shuffle some things. But even then, I think it's a challenge because you're already into the middle of the season.
All right, a few more here. Our guy, Vitaly Pisetsky, says he does believe in Luke Fickell. He thinks he now realizes the issues run deeper here as this team lost in the fourth quarter again and needs to learn how to win. Don't flinch just doesn't apply to this group, which must make Barry angry. Are we looking into a longer rebuild than we thought? Before you answer that question, I want to throw something in here from Jake Chaney, because I asked him a little bit like, what was the locker room like? Because last year, the Illinois game, there was the whole draw a line in the sand and then you come out and you get it taken to you again. And that was obviously something that stood out after the firing of Paul Chryst. But I want to throw something in here about Jake Chaney, because I wanted to hear what Luke Fickell was like in the halftime and how he reacted. So here he is.
See, like if you've been here since like last year, you think about last year and the prior years, if a game came down to this, like there's no chance. So we're down 20. What was the score in halftime?
It's 24-9.
24-9. I mean, let's be real. Last year, are we hanging our heads high? I mean, I think we fought back decently. I mean, that's a right step in the right direction. So, no, I'm not panicked. I know Coach Vic doesn't panic, so I know we'll be back and better.
What was the locker room like at halftime? Because you talk about last year, I think a lot of people think about the Illinois game, and there's this line in the sand, and you guys came out and didn't play any better in the second half. This time around, you guys did. What was it like in there?
In the locker room this time? I mean, like, I love our past coaches. They're great guys, diehard Wisconsin guys, and I love them to death. I'll put my life on the line for them and their families. But there's something about Coach Vic. He's just a G. He's a man. Like, just he's a head coach you want to be behind, and there's no panic out of him. And that surprised me a lot when I first, he's in high intensity to do it in practice, high intensity in the off-season workouts. But when it comes down to it, he doesn't panic. And once the team gets that, once the team understands that, we're going to be stepping towards the right direction.
All right, so that was Jake Chaney talking about. I think that kind of says it all. He said Luke Fickell. He said he loved everything that obviously the last staff did, right? And he loved everything about them and all that stuff. But Luke Fickell's a different dude. He wasn't overreactionary. He wasn't freaking out. He was just, stay the course. And the second half was a hell of an answer. I didn't think they flinched at all in the second half in what they did. Now, if you want to point to them flinching, after the Ches Malusi fumble and not getting off the field, okay. But the idea that they flinched somehow doesn't, to me, Vitaly, doesn't apply to this particular game.
In terms of how long a rebuild will be, it's hard to say. It's only been 2 games. I'm still willing to give a grace period here because I want to see. This happens every year over the course of a season. You have these ups and downs. Obviously, some years, particularly recently, have had way more downs. But I think there's still time to figure some of this out. And I mean, Luke said it. Like this is what he said. We have the talent, and I generally agree. Certainly from an offensive standpoint, defensively, they've got some things to figure out. But I guess I wonder what is a rebuild mean? I mean, is it anything short of a Big Ten championship, which certainly has been the goal in bringing Luke Fickell here? Does that mean you're not at the level and you consider that a rebuild? Like 9-3, does that mean it's a rebuild? I don't know, but I think I'm willing to give certainly Luke Fickell the benefit of the doubt here, and let's see what happens here over the next month or two.
Mark says, this sounds weird to say, but does Luke Fickell need to follow Gary Anderson's example in his first season? Even though he wanted to run a different offense, he tailored his scheme to the personnel Wisconsin had. It seems so stupidly obvious that Allen should have more than 7 runs.
Well, it's too late for that. They've gone whole hog into this bad boy. I'd be interested to hear what Braylon has to say this week and what the response is in the next couple of weeks. I think they know that he's a really important piece. The other thing is, when you've got Ches, this isn't like what we've seen in years past where they were going to feed one guy 22, 25 times a game. So you've got to consider that as well. But he certainly needs the ball more.
Yeah. Chris says, what is the current state of Wisconsin football? He just can't fathom losing to Washington State 2 years in a row.
I'd say the state of Wisconsin football is in a better place now than where it was a year ago, but
still lost.
Yeah, it is. What is the state? Well, Wisconsin has forever been trying to get to a place where it could be something close to a consistent upper echelon program, and they're not there. So they're like a lot of other teams in college football right now. And I know that's disappointing, but it's still going to take that special kind of year to make that leap.
I think it's worthwhile noting that Washington State is now in the top 25 of the AP poll. They're one of 8 teams. What are you laughing about?
Well, because yes, they are, but they're also there because they beat a Wisconsin team that was ranked 19th.
Wisconsin was ranked what last year?
19th.
Did Washington State get in the top 25 after beating Wisconsin last year?
I don't believe so.
They didn't. So get out of here with that. They went on the road and beat number 19 Wisconsin last year. Weren't in the top 25. They're a better team this year. Mm-hmm. How good are they? I don't know, but they have they are a better team. Whether you want to crap on Washington State or not, I don't particularly care, but I think giving them credit for the type of team they are is probably worthwhile here. Wisconsin, it's not like they lost to Northwestern. And if they lose Northwestern, then we can talk about where they are as a program. That's not Northwestern that they played on Saturday. It's just not. So again, it's not ideal to losing to Washington State 2 years in a row, but they are currently a top 25 team in college football. And that is what you have to at least own, I think.
Washington State had the 2 best players on the field. They did.
Cam Ward and Ron Stone.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, for certainly a large portion of that game, I think Ron Stone was the best player on the field. Cam Ward was really, really good and made some key plays down the stretch. So I thought Wisconsin did a really good job in slowing him down for about a 6 drive stretch there and gave themselves an opportunity. But he had some guys running wide open too. Again, big Cam Ward guy. I think he's a nice player. I don't know if he's an NFL player, but I know he's a really nice college player. Mark says, I still think the lollipop snaps hurt the tempo on offense. I know you guys only cared about them getting to the quarterback, so agree to disagree. I'm going to disagree with that. I do think it's an impact. Now, the coach and the quarterback are fine with the snaps. But again, they're getting to where they need to be. He slowed them down for a reason, and they didn't have any issues snapping the ball on Saturday. Which is saying a lot more than you can for Washington State, which did have some issues, despite, having a center that actually has played center extensively. And Wisconsin, Tanner Bortolini working in there for his 4th game as a center in his career. He's looked pretty darn good. And I think as he gets more comfortable, the snaps will probably get a little bit faster. But slowing it down to get it where it needs to be is just fine. But we agree to disagree. I'm saying they should be faster, but I don't think it's the end of the world. Either way, he says, thoughts on the offensive line. I think it's been a huge weakness for the last 2 to 3 years, which is odd given it's a decorated group. Left tackle looked awful. I think we've kind of hit on this, right? I don't know if we need to jump into it anymore. Do you?
No, I think we're good. Yes, the last few years, the offensive line wasn't up to snuff, but this year, we'll see.
Pete says from 2016 to 2019, we're getting back into the Chris Glory days here. He went to 3 New Year's Six bowls in 4 years. What do you think are the odds Fickell has a stretch that successful at Wisconsin? 25%, 50%, 75%? And how high would those odds have to be to justify a few years of mediocrity, which is 8 total wins or fewer?
Oh my goodness, that's a massive question. Well, the landscape here is changing in the Big Ten, and I think it makes it much more difficult, but that's also why you brought Fickle in and paying him $7.8 million on average. I don't know. It's 50%. Also, how long of a line are we talking here? If he's here 10 years, I think he's gonna have a really good run, but I don't know. I wish I had a good answer for you.
Yeah, it's a tough question at this point. It's a tough question at this point. I feel like comparing eras is just extremely difficult now because, as you said, college football is changing, and what's important and who's in your conference also significantly different. Coming up next year, right now, yes, everything right now is very similar to what it was in 2016 or 2017 when Paul Chryst was doing what he was doing, but it's not going to be the same next year with UCLA, USC, and Oregon and Washington coming in, and the college football playoff expanding to 12 teams, and it's just going to be looking significantly different. In New Year's 6 games are not going to be, I think, the standard that we're measuring guys at anymore.
Yeah, and the other thing is, if it were an apples to apples comparison, then I think it's reasonable to think Wisconsin can do what they did under Chryst, because this team is being built to dominate the teams that are in the Big Ten West. It's being built to do more than that. But if you still had this same divisional format, yeah, I think that's realistic. We don't know what it's going to look like in the future with whether there's divisions or not, but with the teams that are being added, these are really good teams, multiple programs that have been to a college football playoff, and that changes the math. But you're right, because the expansion to 12-team college football playoff, it's not about the New Year's 6 games. It's about, look, you may not have won the Big Ten, but can you put yourself in position to be the second or third best team and get into the playoff and give yourself a chance to win a national championship?
Yeah. Tim says Tressel didn't have the defense ready. They looked like a deer in the headlights in the first half. Personally, I've been putting blame on the players, but if a coach doesn't scheme to his players' strengths and continues to force a play style that doesn't fit, who's at fault? First of all, I don't know that there's these huge differences between what these guys are being asked to do from last year. There are certainly differences, but they've played a lot of 2-4-5 on Saturday. They played obviously a lot more dollar with the 6 DBs on the field. And asking like a CJ Getz to play with his hand on the ground is not something that was asked a ton of from the outside linebackers under Jim Leonhard, but it was at times. I personally, I think that there have been guys not necessarily doing their jobs. I don't want to I want to put the blame deserves to be spread around, I think, on the defense for the first 4 drives of the game, but it doesn't simply just go on Tressel. I don't think it does.
There were plenty of games during the Jim Leonhard era where they faced a team. I mean, I think of the Nebraska games. Nebraska carved up Wisconsin's defense with a quarterback that was mobile. And so it's not like this is the first time that this has happened. And again, the defense was able to rally and give the Badgers a chance to win. I also think that there were some interesting adjustments and things that Tressel did to scheme up. There's one play in particular that comes to mind. They put Muma on the edge, and he came off the edge, and he got a sack, I think it was. It was just utilizing guys in different ways, and I think he is tailoring it to their skill sets. That's why Hunter Wohler has 24 tackles in 2 games. Like, he is going to lead this team by far in tackles, and I won't be surprised if he's a first-team All-Big Ten type of player, but I think that that's a big part of the coach's responsibility, and I think that he has, but it is also on the players. I mean, Kamoe Latu, right? A guy that you are relying on significantly who started last season, and you've got to take him out because he just hasn't been as sure-handed as he needed to through a game and a half. Is that on the coaches? I mean,
I don't even know if it's sure-handed. Like I know you're talking about tackling, right? I'm talking about knowing where to be and knowing where to be on the field. Like he obviously got burned on the first big play, and then on the wide receiver throw down the field to the tight end. He was also, I mean, you could see you could see Hunter Wohler point to him and like go back. Like he came up so hard on it, and just the guy ran right by him. That was his guy, and we didn't see him barely at all on defense after that. And I'm not saying that that's when the game changed for Wisconsin, but Preston Zachman, it felt like he was a little bit more where he was supposed to be on a consistent basis. And if you can count on a guy to be on a consistent basis where he's supposed to be, that's a little bit better than a guy who we believe has big play potential, but through 2 games hasn't been there mentally.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
A few more here. Rye Badger says, wondering if everyone is asking why Allen didn't have more carries, saw how effective he was in the run and screen game. That's exactly what Washington State was set up to stop, and they did. Failure was not going to the quick and intermediate throws earlier, plus some bad deep throws and decisions by Mordecai.
Yeah, the other thing is they got yardage in a different way. What Mordecai ended up with, 278 yards. I know there were a couple of big plays, the one to DK, the one to Green, both 40+ yard gains. So it's a give and take. Obviously, in an ideal world, you're running the ball very effectively and passing the ball well too. But this offense has been designed to, if you're going to try and stop this, then we're going to go somewhere else. I don't know. I really want to hear the thoughts of the guys this week on, like, because they're the ones who spent all Saturday and Sunday reviewing the tape and trying to figure out, well, what did Washington State do well and what do we need to do to counteract it? So probably have more insight on that in our show later in the week.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Matt says, who's to blame for these sluggish first halves? Coaching or players? Frustrating to watch a more talented team have to dig their way out of a 24-9 hole, officiating aside. And obviously it was a 24-6 hole before they got that field goal to end the half.
To me, it always falls on everybody. I mean, the coaches are getting paid a lot of money and they're responsible for getting the guys ready. But on the other hand, the guys are the ones out there on the field and they need to be able to execute. So those blame questions to me are always, it's never one person or one position group. It's everybody.
Chris says, how can this team still have such weakness at both offensive and defensive line? O-line still killing them, and they're packed with high-star guys who are upperclassmen. D-line sorely lacks impact players. We've talked about the offensive line quite a bit. I don't know if we need to go any further into that.
I think we're good. The D-line,
I thought James Thompson Jr. had a great game.
He was outstanding. He had a couple just massive plays where he came into the backfield. The one that a lot of people believe should have been a safety was one of them. He had another one as well. So I think that's encouraging. You'd certainly like to get more statistically from Arodys Johnson. This is a group that's still trying to find itself after losing Keanu Benton, and go back to Luke Fickell saying that he wanted to rotate as many as 8 guys on the defensive line. That's all well and good. But to me, that also means you don't have your 1 or 2 hogs that you're just going to rely on for a bunch of snaps. And I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. We did see Darian Varner briefly for the first time. I wonder how he's going to progress. But clearly defensive line is an area on the whole that needs to be more effective. They also don't have Isaiah Mullins, who was a guy, he's a 6-year senior that they were going to be relying on. So I see you making a face, which means you don't think he's, a big time difference maker, but coming into the season, he was going to be one of your top 4. So my point is they're still trying to work through this and figure out who are going to be your guys that you can lean on consistently.
The only reason I'm making that face is, Chris was talking about impact players, like guys that are going to stand out and make big time plays. And I don't think there was ever a strength of Isaiah Mullins. Now, being in the run game and being hard to move, I think that is something that he can bring to the table, and when he's healthy, he will. I don't necessarily think that that's something that is going to be like he's going to be getting in there, getting back there, and getting sacks. Like that's not necessarily the type of player he is. So that's why I was making that face. They need Isaiah Mullins. That said, they brought 9 defensive linemen with them to Washington, which I think says a lot about where they feel they think they have bodies there, but maybe not necessarily the standout guys that they can count on to make plays all the time. But James Thompson Jr., that was probably his best game at Wisconsin, at least statistically. Mark says, do you believe the Badgers fans after 2 games are really overreacting? This is a new staff that needs time to develop a team identity and chemistry, along with being able to recruit the best fits for their new system.
This is college football everywhere. Every week is an indictment on where the program is. And they went on the road in a primetime game in front of a nationally televised audience and lost. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but I don't know how long it's going to take.
We'll close with this one. Josh says, if anyone looks back at this game at the end of the year, will they be talking more about the real Badgers showing up in the third quarter, the Pac-12, whatever refs, or the poor game plan that cost them at the start?
Boy, these are some tough hypotheticals. I think if you're a Badgers fan, you'd like to believe you'll look back and say, wow, that third quarter really was a spark that showed everybody what this team could be. But we also saw this the last handful of years too, where there were these good moments, but on the whole, what they were was the phrase is consistently inconsistent. I think this group has more talent than that. And so my belief is that they will be markedly better over the course of the season and the more snaps they get. But they're the ones that have to go out on the field and prove it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to talk to them this week. And Luke Fickell talks Monday. As we're doing this Monday morning. So he's going to be talking here in a couple hours. The players will talk Tuesday, and then we'll do a show on Tuesday and have a little bit clearer idea of what, Braylon Allen thought about the game, what Jack Nelson thought about the game, and the look ahead to Georgia State. Reminder, also going to be back out at Monks and Sun Prairie on Thursday from 6 to 7. We'll have video up after the show on YouTube if that's something that you're interested in. I've been trying to go live, just not going to work. So we'll have video up after the show, and then obviously the podcast as well, wherever you get your podcasts. So certainly check that out. All right, Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.